guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a heat embossing video with my favorite supplies. I'm going to show you things that I use and tips and tricks, and we're going to try some of my favorite embossing powders. So I hope you will stick with me. Make sure if you haven't to subscribe in the link below, and let's get started. Let's start with a heat tool. So your heat tool is very important. You cannot use a hair dryer for this because you need this small nozzle on the end so that you're not spreading your powder out. This gets super hot. Once it's on, you never want to touch that silver area. But this tool I've had probably 4 or 5 years and it has worked great. It's never failed me. So getting a good heat tool will last a long time. Guys, I will put links to everything that I'm using in this video in the description. The next thing that I'm going to show you are these Swiffer Sweeper Dries. So I don't know where this idea came from, but these things trap the embossing powder and they help me wipe off the powder that I use to keep it from sticking to different areas. And I can use one for an entire project, if not longer. A lot of times I will keep the same cloth and use it over and over again. So these really work well. You can get these anywhere, any local store, Target or Costco. My next idea, using the coffee filters as my dump zone basically, came from Jennifer McGuire. And so I always use those. These little trays I will use occasionally if I'm trying to get something in a really detailed area and scooping from this area. But a lot of times I'm just pouring my powder over the coffee filter and I get it everywhere I need it to be. Next is the VersaMark ink. So this is a Watermark stamp pad, but I use it for embossing. This has become my favorite, and I've had this one stamp pad, I think at least 5 years. So I use a re-inker when I need it, but it has held up really well, and it just works so well. I haven't found another embossing ink that I like as much as this one. This is one of my favorite containers in my scrapbook room. It is called a Pixie by Storage Solutions, and it can stack on itself. I bought a couple of them, but I just love it for this powder tool. It's what I feel like fits in it the best, and it keeps all that powder in one area. I'm so tired of getting that powder all over my desk when I sit the bag down. So now I put it in this little box and it takes care of it. I'll make sure to link below where I think you can find those containers. Another thing that I always use are tweezers. There's all different types of these. I use just regular Tweezerman tweezers most of the time, and that's just to hold your paper if it's a delicate piece. Sometimes I just use my hands if I'm not going to burn them. And last but not least is a very small tip paintbrush that you can use to remove small particles. You probably should keep this as only using it with embossing powder. I can't say I always do that, but that's a good way to use it. Let's talk basic embossing powders and my favorites from that collection so that you can get some ideas. So this Wow Clear Gloss is something that's nice because you can put other colors underneath it and kind of make your own colors of embossing. It's a super fine, so it's great on sentiments and little detailed stamps, which I like. And I love that it comes in such a big container. The big container, I believe, is $17. I will make sure to link it below for you. But you can use this clear with VersaFine black ink, which is my favorite way to do black embossing. So I always use this ink pad and I use the clear. So the next one that I think is another basic color that you should have is white. And this one is super bright white. It's called Opaque Bright White, super fine by Wow. There are lots of white ones on the market. All are great. I just feel like that one's really bright and nice. The gold that I love is Ranger's Embossing and Super Fine Detail Gold. I use this all the time and it does a great job on sentiments and little fine details as well. So if you're going to get 3 of them, I think those are the 3 you need. If you watch lots of my videos, you know I love organizing. So I definitely do swatches for these, and I have to just do them in the order that I receive them. So each new one, so this is a new one for me, the Salvaged Patina, I coordinate the number and I write that on the bottom, and then I make myself a swatch. And the reason that I do this is because you can do a lot of cool ombre looks, and sometimes the colors that go together are not all from the same manufacturer. So it's really nice to have that to look at and coordinate colors. I wanted to speed ahead and show you all my swatches. Today I'm going to make a card using several of these as an ombre effect, and so I'm going to use number 13, 15, and 44. So see how they can span the whole collection to make your best color combos. Okay, I'm going to speed up this clip because I am going to emboss in some of the basic colors and show you how I do it. This one, I'm going to show you how I do black embossing. So of course, I always start with my powder tool, and then I'm going to use VersaFine Clair Nocturne, which is a really dark black ink. I love this ink for all kinds of things, but I use it exclusively for my clear embossing powder and to be my black. So I'm going to stamp a couple times and I'm going to speed up and show you what it looks like with the clear before I put the heat tool on it like this, and then I'll show you how beautiful it looks once this is heated up. So check this out. I think it looks just awesome. Next, I'm going to show you heat embossing with white on black paper. To me, this is the most troublesome of any type of embossing because it just leaves a lot of residue and you have to be so careful. So I'm going to do a lot of powder on my piece of paper, which makes people nervous that it's going to leave a residue on there. And I'm going to show you how I get that off in just a minute. But I really ink it up, and I still will probably end up needing to go back and remove little fine pieces. Here it is with the clear embossing ink on there, and then I'm going to put this white over it. You'll see how bright this white is on the black. It looks really nice. Big thing, always flick the back of your paper. I feel like that gets more of those little pieces off, and I blow on it. I do everything. And then when you're working with black, sometimes it doesn't seem like just the tiniest piece is going to make a difference, but those white particles are very fine. And if you leave one on and heat it up, it's stuck to your paper. And with black paper, you can't really use a mono sand eraser or anything to get it off easily without making a spot on your paper. So just be really careful. Make sure you're really doing a good job getting all those little particles off. So let's look at how bright that looks on black paper. I love the effect that it gives, and it just makes a beautiful sentiment or anything that you're going to use. Now, once this is heated, I use that Swiffer cloth to wipe it off, and it gets all the powder residue. I'll show you a picture. Here's those final results. The next segment, I'm going to emboss on vellum, and I'm going to do gold with VersaMark. So the first thing you want to do when you're embossing with vellum is, of course, prep your paper. I use the vellum from Simon Says Stamp, and I feel like it is great vellum. It just does such a good job with this. The other thing is make sure your stamp is clean. So vellum is clear, and it just doesn't give you a lot of coverage if for some reason you have a little bit of like a dark stain on your stamp. Granted, I think that the gold would probably cover it up, but I just do a really good job cleaning my stamps off because I've had a few where you could see it through the embossing. So got this good and clean. Now we're going to add our gold embossing. I'm going to show you how fast this stuff comes off. So I usually just check it out. I scooped it off. I didn't even really do much hitting it or tapping it on the back, and there is nothing on there. So it's a really easy way. I think a lot of people are scared of vellum, but I feel like you just need to move quickly so you don't burn the vellum and warp it. But as long as you're moving quickly, it works great and it gives such a beautiful effect. Now we're going to move to the making of this card, which I would call advanced techniques. So different ways to layer embossing powders and make kind of an ombre effect. So we'll see what you think. So I made these flowers using a stencil, and I thought it would be interesting to show you how I embossed with a stencil. So for this first flower, this is the lightest flower that I did. I prepped my paper with the powder, and then I'm using a little bitty eye crafter blending brush, and I'm putting the VersaMark clear ink into the stencil. Once I have the stencil filled in, which is hard to see on camera, but you can see that there's a slight color difference there, I go ahead and start with my lightest color of powder. So this is called Mint Macaroon by Wow, and it's a translucent one of their powders. So we will be able to see the color, but it'll be a very light color. So once I get all these little flakes off, I'm ready to heat it. And you can see it is very see-through, but you can see the gorgeous shine and that little bit of mint color to it. So once this is done, I want to let this dry. I want to let it cool off a little bit, and then I'm going to start with the next layer. Make sure not to forget to re-powder every time in between each layer. You've got a lot of sticky surface there with the previously embossed area, so you need to make sure that you've re-powdered. Plus, you've probably blown all your powder off when you heated it up last time. So do that, and then I'm going to lay down this stencil, and we're going to use the same little eye crafter brush and fill in with VersaMark ink. So once I've filled this in completely, I'm going to remove my stencil, and we're going to add this Distress Embossing Glaze, and this is Salvaged Patina, the new color. It works really well with these colors. I feel like it gives it a really good monotone and hopefully ombre effect when we're using it. So when you go to heat this, because this is the second layer, you need to be very careful that you don't overheat. So quickly with a heat tool, make sure it's not starting to bubble up or anything like that, like you're overdoing it. And then we'll let this cool, powder it off again, and we'll do the middle layer. For the middle layer, we're using our darkest shade, which is the Wow Embossing Powder in the color OASIS. So you'll see this is a little bit darker. Once again, you've got this big area in the middle of an embossing. You've got to be very careful with your heat gun. So you want to make sure it's hot, and you want to do it as quick as you can to not overdo it. So there it is. Okay, so this next one, I did 3 different flowers. This flower is on regular solar Nina White paper with Distress ink and Salvaged Patina as the bottom layer. And I'm just going to lightly do this. And then my 2 detail layers of the flower are going to be in embossing powder. So I'm going to speed this up for you. Next, I need to decide what my middle layer color is going to be. This is where these swatches come in handy. So I'm looking at my different swatches to see how I want to do this flower. I'm going to start with my middle layer as the Salvaged Patina Embossing Glaze because that's a little bit lighter than the other color. I'll follow that with the Oasis Wow Embossing Powder. Now let's talk about the vellum piece. I started this off by using a little bit of Salvaged Patina Distress ink, and I used the first layer of the stencil and just did a little bit of that on the vellum. And then now I'm adding VersaMark clear ink with my little eye crafter brush as the second layer, and we're going to use the same layers that we did last time. So we're going to use the embossing glaze that's Distress ink Salvage Patina first, and then we're going to follow that with the Wow embossing powder in the color Oasis. Quick reminder on vellum, make sure you move quickly so that you do not cause the paper to warp, and good heat embossing looks nice and smooth. It doesn't have bubbles or raised areas where you've overheated it. So here's how that looks heated up. And now I'm going to add the darker layer and skip ahead to the sentiment. So I've cut this out and I have added another layer of white cardstock to it just to give it a little thickness. And then now I'm taking my VersaMark ink and I'm just dabbing it on because I want to make this a two-toned sentiment. So I need the whole thing covered. This makes it a little tricky on how you're going to hold on to it and deal with these embossing powders, but the end result is so cool. So I picked it up carefully with tweezers and set it inside of this coffee filter. And now I'm going to do my bottom layer as gold. You'll see I make some mistakes. I'm sure you could get a little bit more accuracy using those little triangle or maybe a spoon or something. But this is pretty easy to fix. So I'm just going to fix the A and remove some of that gold, and then I'm going to add my darker color. So you can see even though it's got stickiness to it, I was able to do that pretty easily, so not too much to worry about there. Now I have not heat embossed this, so the top part of this word is still sticky, and I'm going to use my darkest color, which is the Oasis of the Wow powders, and I'm going to put it on the top level. So I'm just kind of tapping it on, and it's okay if these overlap a little bit in the middle, but you do need to be careful with your second layer. You don't want it to cover all of one of the letters. So you'll see me kind of hold it down and just jiggle it around different ways, make sure that I've got everything covered. The nice thing about VersaMark ink is that it stays wet for quite a while, so it gives you some time to get this done. I felt like the best way to heat this up was just to hold it in my hand and kind of adjust as we got an area heated up. So you'll see me once I get close to my fingers, I'm going to change it up. And I tried doing it down on the mat too. That worked for the most part once I got it started. And just using a really, really heated gun makes it look awesome. So I thought you might want to see how I laid the card out. I've got these 3 flowers that are different. One is vellum, one is solid embossing, and the other one is ink blended with embossing on top. The leaves I ink blended and then embossed, and then you've got this nice fun thanks in the middle. So I think this card turned out great. I am so glad you stuck with me to the end. Make sure that you take time to subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment if you have any questions. I will include all the links in the description. Those links at the bottom do give me a slight commission if you click through them, so I would really appreciate if you do that. It helps me run this channel. I am here every week with new videos, so please come back and see me. Thanks so much. Bye.